Good morning and welcome to the 8th meeting of the Citizen Participation and Public Petitions Committee of 2025. Our rather dry order of business ensures that our first item this morning is to agree to take items 4 and 5 on the agenda in private, which will relate to the consideration of a draft report on public participation and also a paper on how we might consider requests from individuals who have asked to remove their names from active petitions. Are members content to take those items in private?
Agreed.
We are, thank you. That brings us to item 2, which is the consideration of continued petitions. And the first of those is in petition number 1931 to improve the R100 rollout by prioritising properties who currently have speeds of less than 5 Mbps. And it's lodged by Ian Barker. Calls on the Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to prevent digital exclusion from rural properties and their households by giving priority to the R100 programme to properties with those poor internet speeds. And we last considered this in October 24 and at that time agreed to write to the Scottish Government, who responded saying that through the 3 strands of activity, its R100 commitment to extend superfast broadband across 100% of premises in Scotland has been met. The Scottish Government states that its voucher scheme performs favourably when compared to other publicly funded demand-led interventions. So in view of the Scottish Government's response to that, do members of the committee have any comments or suggestions for action? Mr Torrance.
Thank you, Convener. I wonder, in light of the Scottish Government's response, if we would consider closing the petition under Rule 15.7 of Standard Orders on the basis that an inside-out approach is taken to sequential works whereby built begins from primary exchange location where the main fibre control unit is located out into communities, and the Scottish Government has given no indication that it intends to prioritise properties with internet speeds of less than 5 megabytes per second.
So, a proposal to close this particular petition in view of the fact that the aims of the petition have been largely met, although in one respect the Government will not be taking action forward. Are we content to close the petition? We are, thank you. Petition number 1989 to increase defibrillators in public spaces and workplaces, and this has been lodged by Mary Montague, and it's the first of 2 petitions concerning defibrillator provision that we're considering this morning. And I should just declare an interest in that Mary Montague is the Provost of East Renfrewshire Council, which is obviously the presiding local authority in which my Eastwood constituency sits. The petition calls on the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to support the provision of defibrillators in public spaces and workplaces. And we last considered this on the 30th of October 2024, and we agreed to write to the Minister for Public Health and Women's Health. The Minister's response highlights the Scottish Government's participation in the Save a Life for Scotland partnership and the increase in defibrillator deployment by the public in recent years. The Minister also points to a number of relevant factors beyond the availability of defibrillators, such as optimal placement, availability and accessibility of the equipment, and bystander confidence to use defibrillators. Now, we pressed the Minister on engagement with the UK Government regarding defibrillator provision through the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974, and the submission explains from the Government that there is a lack of strong evidence for the effectiveness of legislation to mandate defibrillators in designated places, and as such the Scottish Government is focusing its efforts on its established approach to improving survival rates. So I think the committee will recall that we've been a little concerned by the Scottish Government's response to this. These defibrillators are now being implemented everywhere else in the United Kingdom. I think I even recall the consequential had been provided in respect of, I can't remember if that's correct, but I have a vague recollection of that. But nonetheless, that may or may not be the case. But nonetheless, it appears that Scotland is taking a particularly unique position by not progressing. And I don't think we were previously entirely convinced by this. Do colleagues have any suggestions as to how we might proceed? Fergus Ewing.
Yes, I agree with that. And just looking at what the Minister Jenny Minto said in the response. The response was that she says there's currently a lack of strong evidence for the effectiveness of enacting legislation to mandate deployment of PAD in designated places. It's unclear whether legislation would be effective. I mean, that suggests there could be some evidence, and we don't know what it is. And if there's a lack of clarity, then I think the best way to proceed might be to call the Minister for Public Health to give evidence. to us on this petition, and possibly, I don't wish to preempt any procedure role here, the next petition as well, which is also about defibrillators.
Well, well, that means that I think that our colleagues agreed. I mean, I do think this is an area where we want to bring the Minister in to give evidence, because I think the committee felt that we had received some pretty compelling testimony, and that there was the example from elsewhere in the country now. So Scotland seems to be uniquely taking the view that we shouldn't be providing defibrillators. And I have to say, I don't think they're a terribly complicated thing to utilise. I mean, there are one or two in my own constituency, and we've heard from people whose lives have been saved through their provision. So I think we'll hold this petition open, and as Mr Ewing suggested, the next petition, 2101, to provide defibrillators for all primary and secondary schools in Scotland, lodged by Peter Earl on behalf of Traquair Primary School, and it calls on the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to provide primary and secondary schools with automated external defibrillators. And when we last considered this petition in September last year, we also agreed to write then to the Minister for Public Health and Women's Health. And members will recall that we highlighted the UK Government's provision of defibrillators to all schools in England and asked whether the Scottish Government will provide direct funding to do the same. I think this might have been the example to which I was referring a moment ago. The Minister's response reiterates that local authorities make decisions on purchasing, installing and maintaining defibrillators for schools in their area. And the response also states that solutions to improving survival from cardiac arrest may differ in each area, and the Save a Life for Scotland partnership takes a data-driven approach in working with local authorities to understand the chain of survival in their areas and how to improve it. Now, the committee has also received a written submission from Roger Hill, and Roger, most of us will now know, is the father of our late parliamentary colleague, the researcher David Hill, who died while playing rugby for the Scottish Parliament rugby team in Ireland. And the submission outlines the work undertaken by the charity set up in David's memory, the DH9 Foundation, which includes facilitating the installation of 42 defibrillators in Dumfries and Galloway. Now, Mr Hill's FOI requests revealed that out of 2,446 schools, 893 have defibrillators on site, and the submission calls on a renewed commitment from the Scottish Government to deliver CPR training to every child in schools biannually, and calls for grant funding to provide defibrillators in schools across Scotland. So Mr Ewing's already suggested that we couple this petition with the last and advise the Minister that we'd like to take evidence from both of them. Are we agreed with Mr Ewing's suggestion? We are. Fine. So both these petitions will be kept open, and we will hopefully be able to examine the issues in detail with the Minister when she hopefully will be available to give evidence. Our next petition is petition number 2118, to recognise the value of swimming pools and provide financial relief to help keep pools open, lodged by Helen Plank on behalf of Scottish Swimming. The petition calls on the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to help keep our swimming pools and leisure centres open by providing financial investment for pools. And we last considered this at our last meeting on the 23rd of April, when colleagues will recall we heard evidence from a range of stakeholders involved with swimming programmes, and this included elite-level athletes like our most successful Scottish Olympian, Duncan Scott, coaches and those involved in developing and implementing programmes for swimming lessons and water safety across Scotland. And then, over the course of two roundtable discussions, we explored the issue of swimming pools as community assets that can integrate with other services for the benefit of a wide range of users, be that young children learning to swim, which we pointed out was absolutely essential, but also as a gateway to other water-based activities and in supporting young people's and other people's mental and physical well-being. Now, we also discussed the potential impact of pool closures for general water safety and the risk of drowning, and in terms of Scotland being able to continue its excellent record of elite athletes competing at the highest international levels. I think we were struck by the fact that Scotland has the highest drowning rates of any of the nations within the United Kingdom. There was support across both panels for the idea of creating a statutory duty to ensure every child has the opportunity to learn how to swim, ideally before they learn primary school, where we heard it is much, much more likely that that skill will be developed, where peer group pressure and other things can lead to other children at a later stage not thereafter properly learning how to swim. Participants spoke about the financial challenges of running swimming facilities and the need to consider smarter investment and a different way of doing things if we are to ensure access to good quality swimming facilities at all levels. And this included calls for a task force made up of representatives from local authorities, Leisure Trust, Sports Scotland, the Scottish Government and Scottish Swimming to take a more joined up and collaborative approach to finding solutions that would keep more pools open. Now, we've all had an opportunity in the last fortnight to consider the evidence that we heard, and I think most of us, or if not all of us, were struck by the fact that we pretty much thought there was a common way forward that we could identify here. Would anybody like to make a suggestion? David Torrance?
Thank you, Convener. In light of evidence that the committee has held and is pretty compelling from the stakeholders, I wonder if the committee would consider a chamber debate on the issue raised in the petition. But I also wonder if the committee would like to write to the Minister for Social Care, Mental Wellbeing and Sport to highlight the evidence the committee has gathered and to ask what consideration the Scottish Government has given to establish a task force to explore solutions for keeping swimming pools open, including whether there should be a statutory provision that the Scottish Swimming and Sports Scotland are consulted on all proposals for pool closures and replacements, and whether the Scottish Government will introduce a statutory duty to ensure every child in Scotland has opportunity to learn to swim.
The member's content. We'll write to the Minister in the first instance, but we will seek to take this to a chamber debate before the end of the session, and hopefully later in the year, given an opportunity for the committee to take issues to the chamber. We've got 2 or 3 that we're considering, but I think we might be able to bring a couple of debates forward in a single session. Petition number 2034 to stop the... And so can I just once again thank all of those who might be watching to see how we followed up on the roundtable discussions. I think, from my own point of view, that was one of the most productive roundtable discussions in terms of the really informed information that our witnesses were able to bring to it. So I thank them again. Petition number 2034 to stop the current proposals for highly protected marine areas, HMPAs in Scotland, lodged by Stuart Chirnside. And it calls on the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to halt their current proposals for HPMAs and to bring forward new proposals that take account of sustainable fishing methods. Now, we previously considered this at our meeting almost a year ago on the 29th of May last, and at that time we agreed to write to our friends at Nature Scot, seeking clarification on whether it is undertaking any work relating to highly protected marine areas. Nature Scot has responded to confirm that it is not progressing any work related to highly protected marine areas, in line with the Scottish Government's previous announcement that it was not to progress with these proposals. And in the light of that, do colleagues have any suggestions as to how we might proceed? Mr Torrance.
Thank you, Convener. In light of evidence that the committee has heard, I wonder if we could close the petition under Rule 15.7 of Standing Orders on the basis that the Scottish Government has confirmed that proposals for highly protected marine areas will not be progressed, and Nature Scot is not progressing work related to highly protected marine areas.
Thank you, Mr Torrance. Mr Ewing.
Yes, I agree with that. I don't think there's any purpose in pursuing it. The petitioner has actually achieved the principal objective of HPMAs being scrapped and entering the burgeoning policy recycling units in Andrew's house somewhere in the bunker, probably. So that's good news. I'll just place on record, however, that I did read the reply from Nature Scot, which I think was quite prompt, July last year. It was the shortest response I've ever seen from them, which said that they weren't pursuing HPMAs. That wasn't really what I had suggested they might be doing. What I suggested they might be doing is pursuing the same issue by other means, not involving HPMAs, but other methods of constraining fishing. I'd just like to place on record my extreme concerns that the lot of inshore fishing in particular has become so much that the future of the industry is parlous. For example, in the Clyde in the West Coast, such as the influence of NGOs and over-regulation, it's resulted in, a few years ago, huge number of fishing boats all around the West Coast, now to a very sadly depleted fleet. And that's a matter, it should be a matter of real concern to all of those, all of us who cherish the contribution of fishermen to the economy, and it does seem to me that they're beleaguered and under threat. I just wanted to say that because that has been put to me by various fishermen and fishermen's families' representatives over the past 4 years, Convener, and in closing this petition, we are most certainly not going to neglect to defend the interests of Scotland's fishermen.
Thank you, Mr. Ewing. And curiously, as in one sort of insomnia, skirting through YouTube, came across, why by chance, some film of communities across the west of Scotland, elsewhere in Scotland, fishing communities, and you are quite struck how in the last 3 decades the landscape of our coastline has changed through the disappearance of so many fishing vessels that used to be the lifeblood of those communities. And we talk about it, but it's quite striking when you actually see the images of the fact that it's gone, and that what remains under pressure from, as I think you correctly identify, Mr. Ewing, the kind of regulation that is still currently in place and which is presents such difficulty for those communities. So thank you for that. But Mr. Torrance has made a suggestion, notwithstanding that, given that the aims of the petition have in fact been achieved. Are we content to close the petition? We are. Thank you very much. That brings us to petition number 2081 to make chronic kidney disease a key clinical priority, lodged by Professor Jeremy Hughes on behalf of Kidney Research UK and Scotland. And it calls on the Scottish Parliament to do what it says in the tin, but to urge the Scottish Government to make chronic kidney disease a key clinical priority. We last considered this on the 15th of May 2024, and we agreed to write to the Cabinet Secretary for Health and Social Care seeking further clarity on the Scottish Government's approach to the designation of clinical priorities. And we have received a response from the Cabinet Secretary stating that the Scottish Government does not have a list of conditions that are clinical priorities, and there is therefore no criteria to designate clinical priorities. The Cabinet Secretary goes on to say that even where there is no specific policy or strategy for an individual condition, the Government is still undertaking work to support all people living with long-term conditions to access the best possible care and support. And this includes, for example, a national policy on the reimbursement of electricity costs for home dialysis. It's the Scottish Government's view that publishing more strategies for individual health conditions would not be the most effective way to improve care. Now, we've also received 2 submissions from the petition, the first of which responds to the Cabinet Secretary and draws our attention to the existence of clinical priorities team within the civil service, with staff aligned to particular clinical conditions. And the petitioner's second submission provides an update on the work Kidney Research UK has been taking to improve awareness, prevention, early detection, treatment and the monitoring of chronic kidney disease in Scotland. This includes the launch of an action plan for Scotland and the efforts to work constructively with the NHS and government bodies to improve the lives of people with chronic kidney disease. Now, the petitioner remains concerned that there is no named civil servant to help oversee and support the changes proposed in Kidney Research UK's action plan, and has invited the Cabinet Secretary to intervene directly in this matter by attending a summit on chronic kidney disease, the first time such an event has actually been convened in Scotland. So 2 quite significant contributions from the petitioner in response to the Cabinet Secretary. Do colleagues have any suggestions for action? Mr Torrance.
Thank you, Convener. I wonder if the committee would consider writing to the Cabinet Secretary once again for Health and Social Care, highlighting the petitioner submissions of the 24th of April 2025, and to ask whether the Scottish Government will provide a dedicated team leader to support the recommendations set on in Kidney Research UK's chronic kidney disease and action plan for Scotland. What assurances the Scottish Government can provide by specific actions to improve the prevention, early diagnosis and the treatment of chronic kidney disease will be included in a long-term conditions strategy, and whether the Cabinet Secretary and Minister for Public Health and Women's Health will commit to attending Kidney Research UK's summit on chronic kidney disease.
Sorry, I just wonder, Clerk, is there a date set for that summit, do we know, or is it just an open thing at the moment? Fine. I mean, those suggestions from Mr Torrance, do those meet with the committee's approval? Yes. They do. Then thank you very much. We'll keep the petition open and we will pursue the issue further in the way Mr Torrance has suggested. That brings us to petition number 2082 to improve the support provided to families affected by cot death. And this has been lodged by Kevin McKeever. It calls on the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to stop promoting the Lullaby Trust to Scottish families for cot death support, as this charity only provides support to families who live in England and Wales. and to improve the practical support available to families by prioritising the promotion of the Scottish Cot Death Trust, who have been supporting families since 1985. We previously considered this petition on the 29th of May last, and at that stage we agreed to write to the Scottish Cot Death Trust, and we've received a response from the Trust which states that a fundamental difference with the final messaging on bed sharing meant that it took a decision not to support the Scottish Government resource on safer sleep for babies. Now, while it aligns with and supports most of the Government's safer sleep messaging, it is the Scottish Cot Death Trust's view that the safest place for a baby under 3 months to sleep is one which is firm, flat, clear and separate. The response goes on to highlight international studies on sudden unexpected death in infancy, which taken collectively suggest there is a 5-fold increased risk of a baby dying if the child shares a bed with their parents. The response also suggests the Scottish Government has plans to update the safer sleep guidance with the Trust, asking that this be used as an opportunity to re-engage with them on the messaging around the risks of bed sharing. As our papers note, the Scottish Government has published updated guidance for professionals on safe sleep for babies, which includes strengthening messaging on bed sharing. Do members have any comments or suggestions for action? Mr Torrance?
Thank you, Convener. I wonder if the committee would consider closing the petition under Rule 15.7 of Standing Orders. The Scottish Government does not promote the Lullaby Trust as a baby loss support organisation and provides grant funding to the Scottish Cot Death Trust to deliver their sudden unexpected death in infancy simulation and SUDI awareness training. And the Scottish Cot Death Trust aligns with and supports most of the Scottish Government's safer messaging, but was unable to support the final messaging relating to the bed sharing and how to do so more safely. And in closing the petition, I wonder if the committee may write to the Scottish Government to encourage it to review its safer sleep messaging, and in doing so, to engage constructively with the Scottish Cot Death Trust to ensure Scottish families have access to a most robust infant safer sleeping message.
I'm content with that. Our colleagues content. I think I would really. I'm pleased, first of all, that in some respects the aims of the petition have been achieved, but I think I would. Can we, in that letter to the government, can we, I think, just very much emphasise the evidence of that 5-fold increase in cot death from shared beds? I don't think we want to just leave that as a lightly laid message. I think that really should be very strongly emphasised to the government. On that basis, are we content?
I was going to say something very similar.
Yes, Mr Ewing.
Particularly in the light of the tragic circumstances that befell the petitioner's family, I think the petitioner has allowed this matter to be raised in the Scottish Parliament, and for us to obtain that evidence, which does show that bed sharing in every country in the world that has policy in this seems to have a fairly high risk of cot death, which is just tragic and sad, and therefore the petitioner has been able to, through his efforts in bringing this petition, highlight that issue and what is a tragic loss for any such family.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. And I think that's why, albeit there's probably nowhere further for the committee to take the petition, that very particular point, I think, should be heavily emphasised to the government. So we thank the petitioner for bringing forward a very significant petition, as Mr Ewing says, motivated by circumstance. And we hope that, given that the aims have in part been addressed, that the future action that proposed to be taken will lead to a significant reduction in incidence of cot death, which of course is a tragedy for any family who has experience of it. Petition number 2083 to review the rules to ensure that no dog becomes more dangerous as a result of breed-specific regulations, lodged by Katrina Gordon. The petition calls on the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to review the Dangerous Dogs Designated Types Scotland Order 2024 and to ensure that breed-specific regulations do not restrict responsible dog owners from undertaking exercise and training routines which support the dog's welfare and reduce the risk of their dog becoming dangerous. We previously considered this petition at our meeting on the 12th of June last, and then agreed to write to the Minister for Agriculture and Connectivity. Following comments made during the Stage 1 debate on the Welfare of Dogs Scotland Bill, the committee received a response from the Minister for Community Safety, who has portfolio responsibility for dog control and dangerous dog-related policy matters. The Minister has restated the Government's position that introduction of safeguards in relation to XL bully dogs in Scotland followed as a direct result of the UK Government decision to introduce controls on XL bully dogs in England and Wales. And the Minister goes on to state that the Scottish Government recognises the importance of engaging with and hearing from XL bully dog owners on the impact of the safeguards, with officials having previously met with the petitioner. Advice and support for XL bully dog owners has also been provided in response to correspondence received via the XL bully dogs inquiries email mailbox. Evans. In response to our question about the verification of XL bully dog characteristics, the Minister states Scotland is using the breed definition confirmation standard developed in England and Wales to ensure a constant approach across the whole of the United Kingdom. However, it's noted that it's the responsibility of owners to check if their dog is an XL bully, and where there is doubt, to follow the XL bully safeguarding rules as a precaution. We've also received 2 submissions from the petitioner, the first of which responds to the Minister and highlights the impact of the regulations on the welfare and safety of dogs within private homes. The petitioner also draws attention to advice provided to the Scottish Government in advance of the safeguards being introduced to avoid breed-specific legislation and explore alternative ways forward. And the petition's most recent submission comments on the report published following the summit on responsible dog ownership. And while the petitioner welcomes recommendations to provide more funding for dog wardens with Police Scotland, and to continue ministerial engagements with some stakeholder groups on this matter, the petitioner remains concerned that little is being done to address the consequences of these breed-specific regulations, which, in her view, are resulting in otherwise healthy and well-behaved dogs becoming more dangerous, particularly in their own homes. And the petitioner repeats the call for those regulations to be repealed, and offers some potential actions aimed at supporting the welfare of dogs who are restricted by these rules. Go to our Crufts expert, Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Convener. I have a lot of sympathy with this petition. I think that when we last wrote to the Scottish Government, the response has been detailed, and ultimately, with the aims of the petition, are that responsible dog owners with kind dog that doesn't require any muzzling, that can routinely socialise well. According to the Scottish Government, if that dog looks like an XL bully, then that must be restricted in terms of their exercise and training. So in that sense, I believe that the Petitions Committee has answered the petition. Ultimately, as the convener has highlighted, it's up for dog owners to attempt to identify if they have one of the designated dogs based on type. I think it's very difficult to discern in many cases. But I would urge members of the public, if they feel that they are covered by this legislation, to sign up to muzzle-specific training and not immediately place that device on the dog so that it becomes routinely used to it. But unfortunately, on the basis of all of that, I think that we have to close the petition under Rule 15.7 of the Standing Orders.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Golden. Colleagues, any other comments or observations? Are we content to support Mr. Golden's proposed petition? We are. Thank you. That brings us to petition number 2090, to update the legislation granting submission for digital display boards, lodged by Stephen Henson. And the petition calls on the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to update the Town and Country Planning Control of Advertisements Scotland Regulations 1984 to require application for express consent to advertise using a digital display, including where a site has been upgraded from a traditional paper-based display. We previously considered this petition on the 12th of June, when we agreed to write to the heads of Planning Scotland, the Royal Town Planning Institute and Outsmart. We have received a submission as well this morning from our colleague Paul Sweeney, who was otherwise hoping to be with us as we considered the petition further. Outsmart, the Trade Association for the Out-of-Home Advertising Industries, provided its views on the petition. Outsmart's response explains that applications for advertisement consent require public consultation and that planning authorities determine applications on a case-by-case basis. Outsmart's view is that the existing provisions are proportionate and appropriate. The submission explains that out-of-home media owners can work with local authorities to investigate and resolve matters where there is an issue. And this very often relates to the luminescence of the digital advertising screens. And as I say, you will see Mr. Sweeney has lodged a submission looking at best global practice, the best of which he says is in Melbourne City Council. And that's all detailed in his submission. Notwithstanding which, do colleagues have any suggestions for action? Mr. Torrance.
Thank you, Convener. I wonder if the committee would consider closing the petition under Rule 15.7 of Standing Orders on the basis that the Scottish Government considers the existing provision to be appropriate and it is up to local planning authorities to determine application on a case-by-case basis. And Outsmart Association for Home Advertising Industry considers the existing provision to be proportionate and appropriate.
Mr. Torrance proposes switching the lights off on this particular petition. Mr. Ewing?
I mean, I agree that I don't think we can take it any further. We have ventilated the issue of luminescence, but the Scottish Government, to be fair to them, do say that local authorities can produce guidance as they wish. They can for their own area, and you know, Glasgow being more of an urban metropolitan local authority, this may be more of an issue than it is for rural. So I think, to be fair to the Scottish Government, they have pointed the petitioner to the fact that it's his local authority that could be persuaded to introduce guidance, because I did read the petitioner's comment that the particular large sign is opposite 4 small houses directly opposite. One can imagine that that could form night light nuisance, especially in the evening. So it's really a matter for the local authority, just in case the petitioner feels that we're not giving casting sufficient light.
Yes, I don't mean to be flippant at all, because I think the issue can be quite distressing for individuals who find themselves sighted opposite what previously was what we used to refer to as an old 48-sheet poster, which you know, wasn't sometimes had downlighting, if you like, at night. But particularly the digital displays where there are multiple advertisements that revolve over a course of any 1 hour, sometimes quite rapidly, and depending on the luminescence of that, I imagine that could actually be quite distracting. But I think the solution, as the government suggests, is through local authorities. So are we content with Mr. Torrance's proposal to close the petition at this stage? We are. Thank you. That brings us to petition number 2102, to require anyone found guilty of rape or sexual assault to be registered as a sex offender. This is the last of our continued petitions this morning, and it's lodged by Anna Christina Seaver, and it calls on the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to abolish the option of an absolute discharge in cases where the accused is found guilty of rape or sexual assault, and to introduce a statutory minimum sentence for these offences, which includes the convicted person being registered as a sex offender. We previously considered this petition on the 25th of September last year, when we agreed to write to the Scottish Government, to Victim Support Scotland, Rape Crisis and the Scottish Sentencing Council. The Scottish Government's response states that it supports discretion for the criminal court when sentencing in individual cases, including absolute discharge for rape and sexual assault, if the judge considers that to be appropriate. The submission states that the Scottish Government does not have any current plans to adjust the powers of the court to impose absolute discharges in criminal cases. The committee asked the Scottish Sentencing Council for details on circumstances in which an absolute discharge might be given. I think we were curious to understand why that would be the case. When someone is found guilty of rape or sexual assault, its response states that as each case is unique and turns on its own facts and circumstances, it's not possible for the Council to be more specific about what exceptional circumstances might amount in respect of any offence, which doesn't really advance us terribly much. Victim Support Scotland supports the aims of the petition and states in its response that there is no evidence to support a view that there are cases sufficiently exceptional to warrant an absolute discharge for sexual crimes. Given the seriousness of rape and sexual assault, Victim Support Scotland believes there should always be some form of punishment and safeguarding for the public as the result of a guilty verdict. The submission states that abolishing absolute discharge for sexual crimes would validate the experience of survivors, show a clear outcome from the trial, and demonstrate that justice has been carried out. Rape Crisis Scotland's response states that it's difficult to imagine any circumstance where an absolute discharge would be appropriate for a crime as serious as rape. Do members have any comments or suggestions for action? Mr Ewing.
Yes, I think you've highlighted that in the Victim Support Scotland written submission of the 20th November last year, considerable doubt is cast on the approach currently taken and how an absolute discharge can conceivably be justified. I appreciate that the argument from the government is that this will only occur in the most exceptional circumstances, but we don't really know what these are, nor how frequently this disposal has been deployed. I think we should know that, and on a wider note, Convener, I would suggest that we do write to the Scottish Sentencing Council to highlight the Victim Support Scotland's written submission and ask how people can have confidence that absolute discharges are being used appropriately given the serious nature of rape and sexual assault and the lack of information provided about what exceptional circumstances means in practice for such cases. I do also think that we should write also to the Lord Advocate and to the Justice Secretary asking the same questions so that we get a suite of answers and highlight the fact, the worrying, troublesome fact that those subject to an absolute discharge would not be made the subject of sex offender notification requirements. In other words, they fall off any radar that may exist, however adequate it is or not. I mean, that again seems to be anomalous. And finally, I think this petition, quite understandably, Convener, has attracted a fairly high level of support. Was it 563 signatures from memory, thereabouts, up from when we last considered it quite substantially. So plainly it's a matter of considerable public interest. So for that reason, rather than close it today, even although we're moving towards the end of this section of Parliament, I think we should have one more shot at least to obtain information that we haven't, in my view, at any rate, thus far obtained.
Thank you, Mr Ewing. I'm afraid I felt that reading the Scottish Sentencing Council's submission had a terrible whiff about it of how can we get rid of this annoying inquiry by not really responding to it in the shortest possible way. And I didn't feel it was an adequate response whatsoever. It may not be possible to summarise matters as they suggest, but I think they could have gone a little further in giving some examples from what must be the experience of which they are aware to illuminate the committee further. So I don't feel that they did justice to the inquiry of the committee at all. So I'm very much of the view that Mr Ewing's suggestions have merit. Do colleagues have anything they wish to add, or are we content to keep the petition open and to pursue these matters with the government and with, in particular, the Lord Advocate and the Cabinet Secretary? Mr Ewing?
I mean, I agree with all that. Just one further point, if I could add, that the Scottish Government in its response says that there are checks and balances, and one of them is that the Crown Office and Fiscal Service, if they consider the court has imposed an unduly lenient sentence, is open to them to appeal against that sentence. I wonder if it could be clarified. I should know this, but I don't, because my practising days have been over for 2 decades now. But does that actually apply to an absolute discharge? Is that a sentence? Is it not an exoneration of sorts? So does that actually apply, and can the Crown appeal against an absolute discharge? And secondly, have they ever done so?
Yeah.
You know, has that actually happened?
Well, I think
that competent.
I think illuminating some of the alleged ways forward with evidence of incidents would actually be quite helpful for the committee to understand whether these things have actually ever occurred. Thank you again for that. Are we content then to keep the petition open and to pursue the matter further in the way that has been suggested?
Agreed.
We are. Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of item 2. That brings us to item 3, which is the consideration of new petitions. We only have one new petition to consider this morning. I should just highlight that in considering new petitions, as I always do, in advance of the committee considering them, we do two things. The first is that we invite the Scottish Parliament's independent research body, SPICE, to offer us a view on the issues that have been raised in the petition, and these are submitted to members of the committee in advance with the papers we receive. And we also invite the Scottish Government to give us a preliminary view, and we do those two things only because historically they were the first two things the committee used to then recommend doing and only delayed the progress and consideration of the petition. So we come to the petition with those two bits of information in front of us. Our only new petition this morning is petition number 2147 to create more women-only homeless accommodation that protects and meets the specific needs of women. This has been lodged by Laura Jones on behalf of the Scottish Tenants Organisation, and it calls on the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to reform homeless services in Scotland and to ensure that services protect women from sexual assault and exploitation by increasing funding and supporting the creation of more women-only homeless accommodation. The petitioner tells us that increasing numbers of women are being placed in unsuitable hotel and bed and breakfast emergency accommodation with little consideration for the specific challenges and risk this poses for women. The petitioner is particularly concerned about the risk of sexual assault and exploitation women face when placed in temporary emergency accommodation. As the SPICE briefing notes, while local authorities have a duty to assess anyone applying as homeless in their area and to provide temporary accommodation in certain circumstances, the Scottish Government has a policy to reduce the use of temporary accommodation. And the briefing also highlights Scottish Government homelessness statistics for the period between April and September 24, which indicate that hostels and bed and breakfast accommodation accounted for 24% of temporary homeless accommodation. In its response to the petition, the Scottish Government recognises that women's experiences of homelessness are very different to the experiences of men, and therefore the response to their housing needs should also be different. The response draws our attention to the Temporary Accommodation Standards Framework, which was published in April 23, and aims to ensure that any time spent in temporary accommodation causes minimal harm by making sure that accommodation is of good quality, safe, warm and affordable, with consistency of standards across Scotland. The framework includes standards on support to access different types of accommodation, allocated on the basis of gender and provision of single-gender accommodation for households experiencing domestic abuse. The Scottish Government response also makes reference to implementation of the Equally Safe strategy, which members will know is aimed at preventing violence against women and girls and supporting survivors who have experienced such abuse. And in the year ahead, the Government will invest £21.6 million in delivering Equally Safe. Now, members will also have noted from our papers that issues related to this petition have been raised as part of the Housing Scotland Bill and the Social Justice and Social Security Committee's inquiry on the financial implications that women face when leaving an abusive relationship. This is obviously the first time we've considered this petition, and I can see we are joined this morning in the gallery by those who might have an interest in it. So I wonder, colleagues, if you have any suggestions as to how we may proceed. Mr Torrance?
Thank you, Convener. I wonder if the committee would consider writing to the Scottish Government seeking clarification on the funding it has provided through the Delivering Equally Safe Fund or the local government settlement, and what specific contribution this has made to the provision of women-only homeless services and efforts to ensure a consistent gender approach is taken to allocation and supply of temporary accommodation. I wonder if it would also consider writing to government when it expects the temporary accommodation standards framework will become legally enforceable.
That latter point, I think, being particularly pointed. Mr Chowdhury, you're nodding in...
Yeah, I agree with Mr Torrance.
You agree. Mr Ewing?
Yes, I do agree, and I'm struck by the information that we've had from the petitioner and others that of the extent of the gravity of this problem and the extent of the risk to which these women are exposed. And I note that we, in our papers, that there's reference to the work that Ash Regan has done on the topic of hostel safety, and she refers to the need to stop more women dying. And I believe the Evening Times newspaper has run a campaign highlighting this. So whilst the Scottish Government has said that funding has been provided, there was a sort of lack of clarity about whether any of that funding is going to find its way into providing a solution that petitioner wants. So I do think that in the approach that Mr Torrance has advocated, with which I agree, we should specifically ask exactly what will be done to address this year. Not vague, money will be made available in a general way, but what exactly will be done. Otherwise, we will be in the same position. Nothing further. My concern is, and I hope I'm not being unfair to the government, needless to say, I would never wish to do that, but my concern is that, you know, this is one of these issues where we talk about spending huge amounts of money, but nothing actually happens.
Thank you, Mr Ewing. All duly noted. The recommendation from Mr Torrance is that we keep the petition open and we pursue the issues as he has directed and as Mr Ewing has fleshed out. And in addition, are members content that we proceed on that basis? We are, so we'll keep the petition open and we will take it forward on that basis. That brings us to the end of the public part of our consideration of business this morning. We'll suspend briefly. Thank you.